Hi, I'm Mitch Johns, and I'm doing my book review on Empire Falls by Richard Russo. For the first part of the book talk, I'm going to be talking about an overall summary of the story, and then I'm going to zero in on some of the themes that are evident throughout the book. The novel's main character, Miles Roby, works at the Empire Grill. It's one of the only standing businesses in Empire Falls remaining. Most of the businesses were owned by Mrs. Whiting, but they all went bankrupt and went out of business. And Miles was the manager of the Empire Grill, and she promised over 20 years prior that when she died, he would be the preceding owner of the Empire Grill. Miles dreamed of going to college, but he couldn't go off to college since his mom was diagnosed with cancer, and he decided to stay home and help her and take care of her along with his brother. His brother David always encouraged him to take the opportunities that arose in other cities and other job opportunities that he had. Miles was always scared of leaving Empire Falls since he didn't really know any other life than the town that he had lived in. In the beginning of the novel, Miles had just been left by his wife, and he was kind of down in the dumps, and he was thinking to himself, like, when am I ever going to catch a break? Like, everything's just been down, down, down for me. Like, when am I ever going to get something positive? As I said before, Miles was promised to own the Empire Grill, but he began to think, is it even worth it at this point? Since all the stores around it were closing and the economy was beginning to whimper, he was really thinking, like, is there even any point of becoming the owner of the diner? Miles's daughter, Christina, nicknamed Tick in the book, is introduced, and she just recently broke up with her boyfriend, and she was reminding her dad to not let the man who he nicknames the Silver Fox to get under his skin, since he's a better man, and he took advantage of his wife and took her from him. Miles dislikes Walter, who he called the Silver Fox, so much that on page 25 it says, "Grab an axe handle, meet the Silver Fox, and stave his head right there in the doorway." He tries to avoid him at all costs outside of the diner, since this bothers him so much, obviously, since he lost his wife to her. As I recently said, Tick broke up with her boyfriend Zach, and that caused disruption in her life since she had to find all new friends, and his friends were talking bad about her, and she had to find new people to eat lunch with, and this caused a really turn for the worst for Tick. At lunch, she is stuck sitting with John Voss, a boy who was abused as a child and bullied all throughout school, and we'll get to him in a later point in the book talk. But Tick, she works at the diner, and it's not that she hates working with her father and working at the diner. She just thinks that there's more and better opportunities for her and her father in other towns, and she sees everything around the diner just going out of business and going bankrupt, and she's ready for change. Next, Miles visited with Mrs. Whiting, the owner of the grill, and they went over the financial details. Miles was expecting a different outcome, as he thought the diner was gonna shut down, since he's lost a lot of money over the years. He's a little saddened, and he knows he should be relieved that he still has a job, but he just wants better opportunity, but he just can't leave Empire Falls. It's been his life all along. Like, he doesn't want to leave, he doesn't want change, and that's what's killing Miles. Now we talk about John Voss. He got a job washing dishes at Miles's diner, and what happens next is crazy. So John, he's a little emotionally destroyed from his experiences as a child, and he brings a gun to school and murders 3 people. After this happens, Miles decides to take Tick and himself, and they move to Martha's Vineyard. They lived there for about 6 months, and Miles wasn't really getting the opportunities and money he thought he once would get when moving out of Empire Falls. So then him and Tick return to a new Empire Falls. They've changed a lot. Even though the Empire Grill was gone, there was companies that were buying storefronts there, and there was a lot of promise for Empire Falls, and the businesses were about to come back, and it was going to be a new town. The town had big expectations and big plans to have the economy up and well again in Empire Falls, and Tick and Miles were all for it. Next, I'm going to be talking about some themes that are very prominent throughout the book. The first theme is Miles's fear of leaving the Empire Falls atmosphere in town. He didn't want to leave what he grew up in. The fear of not knowing whether you're going to have a job or there's opportunities are going to be there in other towns is what keeps people like Miles and the people that live in Empire Falls, that's what keeps them in the towns. They don't want to leave their town. They grew up there. They know everybody around them. Everybody knows everybody's business. Like, they're used to that life. And not that Miles likes that life, it's just that he's holding on to it and he's too scared to take that jump and go for it. Even though his brother David tells him and encourages him all the time to do it, Miles just can't and won't do it. When him and Tick moved to Martha's Vineyard for that short period of time, it took a school shooting at Tick's school for Miles to finally move out of Empire Falls. That just shows how afraid he was and how attached to Empire Falls he really was. I understand Miles' struggle completely, since I live in Gibbsboro. Like, we're a small town and everybody knows everybody. Like, I know my neighbors all down the street, and like, your business is almost everybody's business, and that's not the best case, as everybody would obviously know, but like, that creates almost a like family atmosphere to the little neighborhood we have. Like, you become closer with everybody, and I wouldn't say it's like we're better than everybody around me, like the towns around us, but we're closer and like we know everybody, and I feel like it makes me love my town of Gibbsboro even more. Another theme that is prominent is that Miles is living in denial, and so is the whole town, and Miles and the rest of the town is also living in the past. Empire Falls, there's a lot of businesses shutting down, and they're almost on the verge of collapsing. Like, the economy is just getting worse and worse and worse, almost to the point where it's hit rock bottom. But as the Empire Grill stays open more and more, it's just them in denial. Like, you've lost money almost every year, but you stay open. That doesn't really make too much sense. Russo establishes the idea that the citizens of Empire Falls can't escape Empire Falls. Once you're born into it, there's really no real way out of it. And that is in the nicest way possible that I'm saying that. I don't mean that in that like it's a bad town to live in. I'm just saying the citizens get attached to Empire Falls. Like, they love the town so much, and they don't want to take that leap of faith and maybe take a risk. They'd rather stay in Empire Falls and hope that the town is bought by investors and revived to the town that it once was. Miles was always described as quote-unquote smart enough to escape Empire Falls, and if it hadn't been for his mom getting cancer, maybe he would have gotten out of Empire Falls. But there's always seems to be one thing that just keeps pulling him back into it, and Miles can't find a way to just get out and stay out. And when he comes back to Empire Falls in the end of the book, and it is a whole new town and it's revived, it's kind of a sense of bittersweetness, as we spent the whole book with the economy falling and falling and falling, and then the investors finally bought the buildings and they were ready to bring the town back up and back to a point that it once was at. And that it's just a sense of irony that Miles went through all that hardship and then he leaves, and then everything starts going to get good. I think Russo did this to show how unlucky Miles was throughout the story. He couldn't really catch a break, and it seems like he finally did at the end of the story. I really enjoyed the book, and I thank you for listening to my book talk.